The Girl Who Pretended to be a Boy. Once upon a time there lived an emperor who was a great conqueror and reigned over more countries than anyone in the world. And whenever he subdued a fresh kingdom, he only granted peace on the condition that the king should deliver one of his sons for 10 years' service. Now on the border of his kingdom lay a country whose emperor was as brave as his neighbor, and as long as he was young, he was victor in every war. But as years passed away, his head grew weary of making plans of campaign, and his people wanted to stay home and tend their fields, and at last he too felt that he must do homage to the other emperor. One thing, however, held him back from this step, which day by day he saw more clearly was only one possible. His new overlord would demand the service of one of his sons, and the old emperor had no sons, only 3 daughters. Look on which side he would, nothing but ruin seemed to lie before him, and he became so gloomy that his daughters were frightened, and they did everything they could think of to cheer him up, but all to no purpose. At length one day, when they were at dinner, the eldest of the 3 summoned up all her courage and said to her father, "What secret grief is troubling you? Are your subjects discontented, or have we given you some cause for displeasure? To soothe away your wrinkles, we would gladly shed our blood, for our lives are bound up in yours, and this you know." "My daughter," answered the emperor, "what you say is true. Never have you given me one moment's pain. Yet now you cannot help me. Why was not one of you a boy?" I don't understand," she answered in surprise. "Tell us what is wrong, and though we are not boys, we are not quite useless." "But what can you do, my dear children? Spin, sew, and weave, that is all you're learning. Only a warrior can deliver me now, a young giant who is strong to wield a battle-axe, whose sword deals deathly blows." "But why do you need a son so much at present? Tell us about it. It will not make matters worse if we know."
"Oh, listen then, my daughters, and learn the reason of my sorrow. You have heard that as long as I was young, no man ever brought an army against me without it costing him dearly. But the years have chilled my blood and drunk my strength. And now the deer can roam in the forest, and my arrows will never pierce its heart. Strange soldiers will set fire to my houses and water their horses at my wells, and my arm cannot hinder them. No, my day is past, and the time has come when I, too, must bow my head under the yoke of my foe. But who is to give him the 10 years' service that is part of the price which the vanquished must pay?"
"I will!" cried the eldest girl, springing to her feet, but her father only shook his head sadly. "Never will I bring shame upon you," urged the girl. "Let me go. I am not a princess. I am a daughter of an emperor."
"Go then," he said.
The brave girl's heart almost stopped beating from joy as she set about her preparations. She was not still for a single moment, but danced about the house, turning chests and wardrobes upside down. She set aside enough things for a whole year: dresses embroidered with gold, and precious stones, and a great store of provisions. And she chose the most spirited horse in the stable, with eyes of flame and a coat of shining silver. When her father saw her mounted and curveting at the court, he gave her much wise advice as to how she was to behave like a young man she appeared to be, and how to behave as a girl she really was. Then he gave his blessing and touched her horse with his spur. The silver armor of herself and her steed dazzled the eyes of the people as she darted past. As soon as she was out of sight, and if after a few miles she had not pulled up to allow the escort to join her, the rest of the journey would have been performed alone. But though none of his daughters were aware of the fact, the old emperor was a magician, and had laid his plans accordingly. He managed, unseen, to overtake his daughter and throw a bridge of copper over a stream which he would have to cross. Then, changing himself into a wolf, he lay down under the arches and waited. He had chosen his time well, and in about half an hour the sound of the horse's hoofs was heard. His feet were almost on the bridge when a big gray wolf with grinning teeth appeared before the princess. With a deep growl that froze the blood, he drew himself up and prepared to spring. The appearance of the wolf was so sudden and so unexpected that the girl was almost paralyzed, and never even dreamt of flight till the horse leapt violently to one side. Then she turned him around, and, urging him at his fullest speed, never drew rein till she saw the gates of the palace rising before her. The old emperor, who got back long since, came to the door to meet her, and touching her shining armor, said, "Did I not tell you, child, that flies do not make honey?" The days passed on, and one morning the second princess implored her father to allow her to try the adventure on which her sister had made such a failure. He listened unwillingly, feeling so sure it was of no use, but she begged so hard that in the end he consented, and having chosen her arms, she rode away. But, though unlike her sister, she was quite prepared for the appearance of the wolf, when she reached the copper bridge, she showed no greater courage. She galloped home as fast as her horse could carry her, and on the steps of the castle her father was standing, and as still trembling from fright, she knelt at his feet, and he said gently, "Did I not tell you, my child, that not every bird is caught in a net?" The three girls stayed quietly in the palace for a little while, embroidering, spinning, and weaving, and tending their birds and their flowers. When early one morning the youngest princess entered the door of the emperor's private apartments. "Father, it is my turn now. Perhaps I shall get the better of the wolf." "What do you think? You are braver than your sisters, vain little one. You who have hardly your long clothes behind you." But she did not mind being laughed at, and answered, "For your sake, father, I would cut the devil himself into small bits, or even become a devil myself. I think I shall succeed, but if I fail, I shall come home without more shame than my sisters." The emperor still hesitated, but the girl petted and coaxed him until at last he said, Well, if you must go, you must. It remains to be seen what I shall get by it, except perhaps a good laugh when you come back with your head bent and your eyes on the ground." "He laughs best who laughs less," said the princess. Happy at having gotten her way, the princess decided that the first thing to be done was to find some old white-haired boyard whose advice she could trust, and then to be very careful in choosing her horse. So she went straight to the stables where the most beautiful horses in the empire were feeding in the stalls. But none seemed quite that she wanted. Almost in despair, she reached the last box of all, which was occupied by her father's ancient warhorse, old and worn like himself, stretched sadly out on the straw. The girl's eyes filled with tears, and she stood up gazing at him. The horse lifted his head and gave a little neigh, and then said softly, "You look gentle and pitiful, but I know it is of your love of your father which makes you tender to me. Ah, what a warrior he was, and good times we shared together." But now I am grown old, and the master has forgotten me. There is no reason to care whether my coat is dull or shining. Yet it is not late. If I were properly tended, in a week I could vie with any horses in the stable."
"And how should you be tended?" asked the girl.
"I must be rubbed down morning and evening with rainwater. My barley must be boiled in milk because of my bad teeth, and my feet must be washed in oil."
"I should like to try the treatment, as you may help me in carrying out my scheme."
"Try it then, mistress, and I promise you will never repent."
So, in a week's time, the horse woke up one morning with a sudden shiver through all his limbs, and when it had passed away, he found his skin shining like a mirror, his body was fat as a watermelon, and his movements light as a chamois. Then, looking at the princess, who had come early to the stable, he said joyously,
"May success be on the step of my master's daughter, for she has given me back my life. Tell me what I can do for you, princess, and I will do it."
"I want to go to the emperor, who is our beloved overlord, and I have no one to advise me, which all the white-headed boyards shall choose as a counselor."
"If you have me, you have no one else in need. I serve you as I served your father, if you will only listen to what I say."
"I will listen to everything. Can you start in 3 days?"
"This moment, if you like," said the horse.
The preparations of the emperor's youngest daughter were much fewer and simpler than those of her sisters. They consisted only of some boys' clothes, a small quantity of linen and food, and a little money in case of necessity. Then she bade farewell to her father and rode away. A day's journey from the palace, she reached the copper bridge, but before they caught sight of it, the horse, who was also a magician, had warned her of the means her father would try to prove her courage. Still, in spite of his warning, she trembled all over when the huge wolf, as thin as if he had fasted for a month, with claws like saws and a mouth as wide as an oven, bounded howling towards her. For a moment her heart failed her, but the next, touching the horse lightly with her spur, she drew her sword from its sheath, ready to separate the wolf's head from its body in a single blow. The beast saw the sword and shrank back, which was the best thing it could do, as now the girl's blood was up, and the light battle in her eyes. Then, without looking, she rode across the bridge. The emperor, proud of this first victory, took a shortcut and waited for her at another day's journey, close to a river over which he threw a bridge of silver. And this time it took the shape of a lion. But the horse guessed this new danger and told the princess how to escape it. But it was one thing to receive advice when we feel safe and comfortable, and quite another to be able to carry it out when some awful peril is threatening us. And if the wolf made the girl quake with terror, she seemed like a lamb beside the dreadful lion. At the sound of his roar, the very trees quivered, and his claws were so large that each one of them looked like a cutlass. The breath of the princess came and went, and her feet rattled in her stirrups. Suddenly, the remembrance flashed across her of the wolf whom she had put to flight, and waving her sword, she rushed so violently on the lion that he had barely time to spring to one side, so as to avoid the blow. Then, like a flash, she crossed the bridge also. Now, during her whole life, the princess had been so carefully brought up
that she never had left the gardens of her palace, and so that the sight of hills and valleys and tinkling streams and the song of larks and blackbirds made her almost beside herself with wonder and delight. She longed to get down and bathe her face in the clear pools and pick the brilliant flowers, but the horse said nay, and quickened his pace, neither turning to the right nor to the left. "Oh, warriors," he told her, "only rest when they've won the victory. You still have another battle to fight, and it is the hardest of all." This time, it was neither a wolf nor a lion that was waiting for it the day's journey, but a dragon with 12 heads and a golden bridge behind it. The princess rode up without seeing anything to frighten her, when suddenly a puff of smoke and flame came from beneath her feet, causing her to look down, and there was a horrible creature, twisted and writhing, with 12 heads reared up, as if to seize her between them. The bridle fell from her hand, and the sword which she had just grasped slipped back into its sheath. But the horse bade her to fear nothing, and with a mighty effort she sat upright and spurred straight on the dragon. The fight lasted an hour, and the dragon pressed her hard. But in the end, and a well-directed side blow, she cut off one of the heads, and with a roar that seemed to rend the heavens in two, the dragon fell back on the ground and rose as a man before her. Although the horse had informed the princess the dragon was really her father, the girl had hardly believed him, and stared in amazement at the transformation. But he flung his arms around her and pressed her to his heart, saying, "Now I see you are good as brave as the bravest and wise as the wisest. You have chosen the right horse, for without his help you would have returned with a bent head and downcast eyes. You have filled me with hope that you may carry out the tasks you have undertaken. But be careful to forget none of my counsels, and above all, to listen to those of your horse." When he had done speaking, the princess knelt down to receive his blessing, and they went their separate ways. The princess rode on and on, till at last she came to the mountains which hold up the roof of the world. There she met 2 genii who had been fighting fiercely for 2 years, without one having gotten the best of the other. Seeing that they took to be a young man seeking adventures, one of the combatants called out, "Fat runners, deliver me from my enemy, and I will give you the horn that will be heard in the distance of 3 days' journey." And the other cried out, "Fat runners, help me conquer this pagan thief, and you shall have my horse Sunlight." But before answering, the princess consulted her own horse as to which offer she should accept, and he advised her to side with a genie who was a master of Sunlight, his own younger brother, and still more active than himself. So the girl at once attacked the other genie, and soon clove his skull. Then the one who was left victor begged her to come back with him to his house, and he would hand over Sunlight, as he had promised. The mother of the genies was rejoiced to see her son return safe and sound, and prepared her best room for the princess, who, after so much fatigue, needed rest badly. But the girl declared that she must first make her horse comfortable in the stable, but this was only an excuse, as she wanted to ask his advice on several other matters. But the old woman had surprised from the very first that the boy had come to the rescue of her son, was a girl in disguise, and told the genies that she was exactly the wife he needed. The genius scoffed and inquired what female hand could ever wield a saber like that, but, in spite of his sneers, his mother persisted, and as proof of what she had said, laid at night on each of their pillows a handful of magic flowers that fade at the touch of a man, but remain eternally fresh in the fingers of a woman. It was very clever of her, but unluckily the horse had warned the princess what to expect, and when the house was silent, she stole very softly into the genie's room and exchanged his faded flowers for those she held. Then she crept back to her own bed and fell fast asleep. At the break of day, the old woman ran to see her son and found, as she would soon see, a bunch of dead flowers in his hands. And she passed on beside the bed of the princess, who lay asleep still grasping the withered flowers. But she did not believe any more than her guest was a man, and so she told her son. So they put their heads together and laid another trap for her. After breakfast, the genius gave his arm to his guest and asked her to come with him to the garden. For some time they walked about looking at flowers, and the genius all the while pressed her to pick any flowers she fancied. But the princess, suspecting a trap, inquired roughly why they were wasting precious hours in the garden when, as men, they should be on their stables looking after their horses. Then the genius told his mother that she was quite wrong, and his deliverer was certainly a man. But the old woman was not convinced for all that. She would try once more, she said, and her son must lead his visitor into the armory, where hung every kind of weapon used all over the world, some plain and bare, others ornamented with precious stones, and beg her to make a choice of one of them. The princess looked at them closely and felt the edges and points of their blades. Then she hung on her belt an old sword with a curved blade that would have done credit to an ancient warrior. After this, she informed the genies that she would start early next day and take sunlight with her. There was nothing more for the mother to do but to submit, though she still stuck to her own opinion. The princess mounted Sunlight and touched him with her spur, when the old horse, who was galloping alongside, suddenly said, "Up to this time, mistress, you have obeyed my counsels, and all has gone well. Listen to me once more, and do what I tell you. I am old. Now there is someone to take my place. I will confess it. I am afraid that my strength is not equal to the task that lies before me. Give me leave, therefore, to return home, and do you continue your journey under the care of my brother. Put your faith in him as you put it in me, and you will never repent it. Wisdom has come early to sunshine." "Yes, my old comrade, you have served me well, and it is through your help that I am now victorious. So grieved though I am at your farewell, I will obey you at once, and will listen to your brother as I would yourself. Only, I must have a proof that he loves me as well as you do." "How should I not love you?" answered Sunlight. "How should I not be proud to serve a warrior such as you? Trust me, mistress, and you shall never regret the absence of my brother. I know there will be difficulties in our path, but we will face them together." Then, with tears in her eyes, the princess took leave of her old horse, who galloped back to her father. She had ridden only a few miles further when she saw a golden curl lying on the ground before her. Checking her horse, she asked whether it would be better to take it or to let it lie. "If you take it," said Sunlight, "you will repent, and if you don't, you will repent too. So, take it." On this, the girl dismounted and picked up the curl, and wound it around her neck for safety. They passed by hills, they passed by mountains, they passed through valleys, leaving behind them thick forests, and fields covered with flowers, and at length they reached the court of the Overlord. He was sitting on his throne, surrounded by the sons of the other emperors who served him as pages. These youths came forward to greet their new companion, and wondered why they felt so attracted to him. However, there was no time for talking and concealing her fright. The princess was led straight up to the throne and explained, in a low voice, her reason for coming. The emperor received her kindly and declared himself fortunate in finding a vassal so brave and charming, and begged the princess to remain in attendance on his person. She was, however, very careful in her behavior towards the other pages, whose way of life did not please her. One day, however, she had been amusing herself by making sweetmeats, when two of the young princes looked in to pay her a visit. She offered them some of the food which was already on the table, and they thought it was so delicious that they licked their fingers and would not lose a morsel. Of course, they did not keep the news of their discovery to themselves, but told all their companions that they had been enjoying the best supper they had ever had since they were born. From that moment, the princess was left no peace till she had promised to cook them all a dinner. Now, it happened that on the day fixed, all the cooks in the palace became intoxicated, and there was no one to make up the fire. When the pages heard of the shocking state of things, they went to their companion and implored her to come to the rescue. The princess was fond of cooking, and was, besides, very good-natured, so she put on an apron and went down to the kitchen without delay. When the dinner was placed before the emperor, he found it so nice that he ate much more than was really good for him. The next morning, as soon as he woke, he sent for his head cook and told him to send up the same dishes as before. The cook, seized with fright at this command, which he knew he could not fill, fell on his knees and confessed the truth. The emperor was so astonished that he forgot to scold, and while he was thinking over the matter, some of his pages came in and said that their new companion had been heard to boast that he knew where Lillian was to be found. The celebrated Lian of the song, which begins, "Golden hair, the fields are green." And that's to their certain knowledge he had a curl of her hair in his possession. When he heard that, the emperor desired the page to be brought before him, and as soon as the princess obeyed his summons, he said to her abruptly, "Faitfana, you have hidden from me that you know the fact of the gold-haired Lian. Why did you do this? For I have treated you more kindly than my other pages." And then, after making the princess show him the golden curl which he wore around her neck, he added, "Listen to me. Unless by some means or other you bring me the owner of this lock, I will have your head cut off in the place where you stand. Now, go." In vain, the poor princess tried to explain how the lock of hair came into her possession. The emperor would not listen, and bowing low, she left his presence and went to consult Sunlight what she was to do. At first, his words seemed to brighten her. "Do not be afraid, mistress. Only last night my brother appeared to me in a dream and told me that the genies had carried off Leon, whose hair you picked up on the road. But Leon declares that before she marries her captor, he must bring her a present, a whole stud of mares which belong to her. The genius, half crazy in love, thinks of nothing night and day but how this can be done, and meanwhile she is quite safe in the island swamps of the sea. Go back to the emperor and ask him for 20 ships filled with precious merchandise. The rest you shall know by and by." On hearing this advice, the princess went at once to the emperor's presence. "May long life be yours, O sovereign almighty," she said. "I have come to tell you that I can do as you command if you give me 20 ships, and load them with the most precious wares in your kingdom." "You shall have all that I possess if you will bring me the golden-haired Lian," said the emperor. "The ships you shall have." The ships were soon ready, and the princess entered the largest and finest, with Sunlight by her side. Then the sails were spread, and the voyage began. For 7 weeks, the wind blew them straight towards the west, and early one morning they caught sight of the island swamps of the sea. They cast anchor in a little bay, and the princess made haste to disembark with Sunlight, but before leaving the ship, she tied to her belt a pair of tiny gold slippers, adorned with precious stones. Then, mounting Sunlight, she rode till she came to several palaces, built on hinges, so that they would always turn towards the sun. With the most splendid of these was guarded by 3 slaves whose greedy eyes were caught by the glistening gold of the slippers. They hastened up to the owner of these treasures and inquired who he was. A merchant," replied the princess, "who has somehow missed his road and has lost himself in the island swamps of the sea." Not knowing if it was proper to receive him or not, the slaves returned to their mistress and told him all they had seen, but not before she had caught sight of the merchant from the roof of her palace. Luckily, her jailer was away, and always trying to catch some instead of mares, so for the moment she was free and alone. The slaves told her the tale of their so well that their mistress insisted on going down to the shore and seeing the beautiful slippers for herself. They were even lovelier than she expected, and when the merchant besought her to come on board, and inspect some that he thought were finer still, her curiosity was too great to refuse, and so she went. Once on board, she was so busy turning over all the precious things stored there that she never knew that the sails were spread, and that they were flying along with the wind behind them. And when she did know, she rejoiced in her heart, though she pretended to weep and lament at being carried captive for a second time. Thus they arrived in the court of the emperor. They were just about to land when the mother of the genies stood before them. She had learnt that Leanne had fled her prison in the company of a merchant, and as her son was absent, he had come herself to pursuit. Striding over the blue waters and hopping from wave to wave, one foot reaching to heaven and the other planted in the foam, she was close at their heels, and breathing flame and fire. When they stepped on shore of the ship, one glance told Ilian that the horrible old woman was, and she whispered hastily to her companion. Without saying a word, the princess swung onto Sunlight's saddle, and leaping up behind her, they were off like a flash. It was not until they drew near the town that the princess stopped and asked Sunlight what they should do. "Put your hand into my left ear," he said, "and take out a sharp stone, which you must throw behind you." The princess did as she was told, and a huge mountain sprang up behind them. The mother of genies began to climb up it, and though they galloped quickly, she was quicker still. They heard her coming faster and faster, and again the princess stooped and asked what was to be done next. "Put your hand into my right ear," said the horse, "and throw a brush you will find behind you." The princess did so, and a great forest sprang up behind them, and so thick were its leaves that even a wren could not fly through. But the old woman just seized a hold of the branches and flung herself like a monkey from one to the other, and always drew nearer, always, till their hair was singed by the flames of her mouth. Then, in despair, the princess bent down again and asked if there was nothing more to be done. And Sunlight replied, "Quick, quick, take off the betrothal ring on the finger of Leanne and throw it behind you." This time there sprang up a great tower of stone, smooth as ivory and hard as steel. It reached up into the heaven itself, and the mother of the genies gave a howl of rage, knowing that she could neither climb nor get through it. But she was not beaten yet, and gathering herself up, she made a prodigious leap, landed her way on top of the tower, right in the middle of Ilian's ring, which lay there, and held her tight. Only her claws could be seen, grasping at the battlements. All that could be done, the old witch did, but the fire that poured out of her mouth never reached the fugitives, though it laid waste to the country 100 miles round the tower, like the flames of a volcano. Then, with one last effort to free herself, her hands gave way, and falling down to the bottom of the tower, and she was broken into pieces. When the flying princess saw what had happened, she rode back to the spot, and Sunlight counseled her, and placed her finger on top of the tower, which was so gradually shrinking into the earth that in an instant the tower had vanished as if it had never been. And in its place was the finger of the princess with a ring around it. The emperor received Ilian with the respect that was due to her, and fell in love with her at first sight besides. But this did not seem to please Ilian, whose face was sad as she walked towards the palace or gardens, wondering how it was, while other girls did as they liked, she was always in the power of someone whom she hated. So when the emperor asked her to share his throne, Elaine answered, "Noble sovereign, I may think of marriage till my stud of horses has been brought me, and their trappings all complete." When he heard this, Emperor once more sent for Fetrunners and said, "Fetrunners, fetch me instantly a set of mares with their trappings all complete. If not, your head shall pay forfeit." "Mighty Emperor, I kiss your hands. I have but just returned from doing your bidding, and behold, you sent me on another mission, and to stake my head on its fulfillment, when your court is full of valiant young men pining to win their spurs. They say you are just a man, then why entrust this quest to one of them? Where am I to seek these mares that I am to bring you?"
"How do I know? They may be anywhere in heaven or earth, but wherever they are, you will have to find them."
The princess bowed and went to consult Sunlight. He listened while she told the tale, and then said,
"Fetch quickly 9 buffalo skins and smear them with tar, and lay them on my back. Do not fear, you will succeed in this also, but in the end the emperor's desires will be his undoing."
The buffalo skins were soon got, and the princess started off with Sunlight. The way was long and difficult, but at length they reached the place where the mares were grazing. Here the genies who had carried off Ilian had wandered about, trying to discover how to capture them, all the while believing that Ilian, his wife, was safe in the palace where he had left her. As soon as she caught sight of him, the princess went up and told him that Ilian had escaped, and that his mother, in her efforts to recapture her, had died of rage. At this news, the blind fury took possession of the genie, and he rushed madly upon the princess, who awaited his onslaught with perfect calmness. As he came on, with his saber lifted high in the air, Sunlight bounded right over his head, so that the sword felt harmless. And when, in her turn, the princess were to strike, the horse sank upon his knees, so that the blade pierced the genie's thigh. The fight was so fierce that it seemed as if the earth would give way under them, and for 20 miles round the beasts of the forests fled their caves for shelter. At last, when her strength was almost gone, the genie lowered his sword for an instant. The princess saw her chance, and with one swoop of her arm, severed the enemy's head from his body. Still trembling from the long struggle, she turned away, and went to the meadow where the stud were feeding. By the advice of Sunlight, she took care not to let them see her, and climbed a thick tree where she could see and hear without being seen herself. When they neighed, the mares came galloping up, and eager to see the newcomer, all but one horse, who did not like strangers, and thought they were all very well as they were. As Sunlight stood his ground, very well pleased with the attention paid him, the silky creature suddenly advanced to his charge, and a bit so violently that he had not had 9 buffalo skins caught Sunlight's last moment would have come. When the fight was ended, the buffalo skins were in ribbons, and the beaten animal writhing in pain on the grass. Nothing now remained to be done but to drive the whole stud to the emperor's court. So the princess came down from the tree and mounted Sunlight, while the stud followed meekly after, the wounded horse bringing up the rear. On reaching the palace, she drove them into the yard and went to inform the emperor of her arrival. The news was told at once to Ilian, who ran down directly and called them to her Masad, each mayor by its name. At the first sight of the wounded animal shook itself quickly, and in a moment its wounds were healed, and there was not even a mark on its glossy skin. By this time the emperor, on hearing where she was, joined her in the yard, and at her request ordered the mares to be milked, so that both he and she might buy them milk and keep young forever. But they would not suffer anyone to come near them, so the princess, of course, was commanded to perform this service also. At this, the heart of the girl swelled within her. The hardest tasks were always given to her, and long before the 2 years were up, she would be worn out and useless. But while these thoughts passed through her mind, a fearful rain fell, such that no man remembered, and rose till the mares were standing on their knees in the water. Then, as suddenly as it stopped, and behold, the water was ice, which held the animals firmly in its grasp. And the princess's heart grew light again, and she sat down gaily to melt them, as if she had done it every morning of her life. The love of the emperor for Ilian waxed greater and greater day by day, but she paid him no heed, and always had an excuse ready to put off the marriage. At length, when she had come to the end of everything she could think of, she said to him one day, "Grant me, sire, just one more request, and then I will really marry you, for you have waited patiently for me this long."
"My beautiful dove," replied the emperor, "both I and all I possess are yours, so ask your will, and you shall have it."
"Give me then," she said, "a flask of the holy water that is kept in the little church beyond the river Jordan, and I will be your wife." The emperor ordered fet runners to ride without delay to the river Jordan, and bring back, at whatever cost, the holy water for Ilian. "This, my mistress," said Sunlight, when she was saddling him, "is the last and most difficult of your tasks, but fear nothing, for the hour of the emperor has struck." So they started, and the horse, who was not a wizard for nothing, told the princess exactly where she was to look for the holy water.
"It stands," he said, "on the altar of a little church guarded by a troop of nuns. They never sleep night or day, but every now and then a hermit comes to visit them, and from him they learn certain things that is needed for them to know. When this happens, only one of the nuns remains to guard at the time, and if we are lucky enough to hit upon this moment, we may get a hold of the vase at once. If not, we have to wait for the arrival of the hermit, however long it may be, for there is no other means by obtaining the water."
They came in sight of the church beyond Jordan, and, to their great joy, beheld the hermit just arriving at the door. They could hear him calling the nuns around him, and saw them settle themselves under a tree, with the hermit in their midst, all but one, who remained on guard, as was their custom. The hermit had a great deal to say, and the day was very hot. So the nun, tired of sitting by herself, lay down right across the threshold, and fell sound asleep. When Sunlight told the princess what she was to do, the girl stepped over the sleeping nun, and crept like a cat along the dark aisle, feeling the wall with her fingers, lest she should fall over something and ruin it all by a noise. But she reached the altar in safety, and found the vase of holy water standing on it. This she thrust into her dress, and went back to the same care as she had come. With a bound she was in the saddle, and seizing the reins, bade Sunlight take her home as fast as his legs could carry him. The sound of the flying hoofs aroused the nun, who understood instantly that the precious treasure was stolen, and her shrieks were so loud and piercing that all the rest came flying to see what was the matter. The hermit followed at their heels, but seeing it was impossible to overtake the thief, he fell on his knees and called his most deadly curse down upon her head, praying that if the thief was a man, he might become a woman, and if she was a woman, that she might become a man. In either case, he thought the punishment would be severe. But punishments are things about which people don't always agree. When the princess suddenly felt that she was really a man she had pretended to be, she was delighted, and when the hermit had only been within reach, she would have thanked him from all her heart. By the time she reached the emperor's court, Fetfrunners looked a young man all over to the eyes of everyone, even to the mother of the genies who would now have had her doubts set at rest. He drew the vase from his tunic and held it up to the emperor, saying, "Mighty sovereign, all hail, I have finished this task also. I hope it is the last you have of me. Let another take his turn."
"I am content, Fetfrunners," replied the emperor, "and when I am dead it is you who will sit upon my throne, for I have yet no son to come after me. But if one is given me, my dearest wish shall be accomplished, but then you shall be his right hand, and guide him with your counsels."
But though the emperor was satisfied, Ilian was not. At which she determined to revenge herself on the emperor for the dangers which he had caused Fetfrunners to run. And as for the vase of holy water, she thought that, in common politeness, her suitor ought to have fetched it himself, which he could not have done without any risk at all. So she ordered the great bath to be filled with the milk of her mares, and begged the emperor to clothe himself in white robes, and enter the bath with her, an invitation he accepted with joy. Then, when both were standing in the milk, reaching for the necks, she sent for a horse which had fought sunlight, and made a secret sign to the horse. The horse understood what he was to do, and from one nostril he breathed in fresh air over Ilian, and from the other he snorted a burning wind which shriveled up the emperor where he stood, leaving only a little heap of ashes. His strange death, which no one could explain, made a great sensation throughout the country, and the funeral his people gave him was the most splendid ever known. When it was over, Ilian summoned Fetfrunners before her, and addressed them thus: "Fetfrunners, it is you who have brought me and saved my life, and obeyed my wishes. It is you who gave me back my stud, and who killed my genius, and the old witch his mother. You who brought me the holy water, and you, and none other, shall be my husband." "Yes, I will marry you," said the young man, with a voice almost as soft as when he was a princess. "But know that in our house it will be the cock who sings, and not the hen."